Hi, folks. Jamie Harrison here. Happy Thanksgiving. This week I'm excited that we'll be re-releasing one of our most popular episodes of the season, our conversation with Congressman Ro Khanna of California. Congressman Khanna joined me in September, which I have to say feels like eons ago, but so much of what we talked about is still relevant today, and maybe with the hindsight of a few months, even more relevant. Ro and I talked a lot about the Epstein files and Trump and the Republicans' efforts to circumvent a hearing. Well, now, with the seating of Arizona Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva, Congressman Khanna and his colleague, Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, they now have enough signatures for their discharge petition. This will force a vote on the House floor on the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Folks, this is a bill that requires the Justice Department to publicly disclose the records. Congressman Khanna has been on the front lines of fighting against Trump in his attempts to circumvent the law. And so I'm pleased to reintroduce this conversation and once again have a joyful and happy Thanksgiving. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of At Our Table. And I'm Jamie Harrison, your host. Today, I'm excited to have Congressman Ro Khanna of California with me. Congressman Khanna, he really knows how to speak with conviction. From Palestine to the Epstein files to the MAGA takeover in Congress, he pulls zero punches. Y'all, this is the kind of real talk that you're going to want to turn up the volume on. Congressman, welcome to At Our Table.
Jamie, I am so honored to be here. And I'm amazed at the studio you've built under your leadership where we're having this conversation.
Well, this is really, folks, I wish maybe what I'll do is I'll give you a behind-the-scenes look sometime of the studio at the DNC headquarters, which is also the headquarters where the DCCC has offices. But this is right here on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and it's great to be here with Congressman Ro Khanna and to give him a sense of, he didn't even know it was here. And
well,
so
you were ahead of your time because this is where you're supposed to do podcasts. All the people say, do more social media, do more podcasts. You would set it up. You've set us up for success.
Well, thank you, Congressman. I appreciate that. Well, listen, these are tumultuous times that we're in. Tell me just, how are you feeling right now? I mean, given all of the things that are going on, the murder of Charlie Kirk, the murder of our Minnesota speaker, we see all of the things moving in the administration. And now Congress has a big decision on what it's going to do in terms of, will it pass a continuing resolution? Just give our viewers and our listeners a sense of how you feel at this moment right now in American politics.
I'm concerned. I'm fearful. I'm the ultimate optimist, but I got to tell you, this week really jolted me, and it jolted many of my colleagues. First, on a personal level, and we're human beings. We're out there. We've got families. People are concerned about their safety, and particularly those who are the most vulnerable. I don't put myself in that category, but there are people who really have had a lot of threats, and they're canceling events. People are talking about not doing outdoor things, doing indoor things. So it's not just the fear to people, it's also the distance to democracy of constituents. And then seeing the vice president. I mean, did you see his podcast?
Yeah.
First of all, the guy doesn't smile. I mean, he's just like a rant of anger, blaming the left, calling for the basically suppression of left networks, left speech. I mean, just this anger that
Un-American.
Un-American, angry, rage, not doing anything to tamp down or to bring the country together, and it's just such a divisive time. You have people tweeting out casually about national divorce and separating the country. And I've just been struggling about how do we pick up the pieces? How do we, Emmanuel Cleaver, we both know well, it says, if you fire with fire, all you're left with is ashes. So,
Wow.
yeah, you got to fight. But what do we do to summon something bigger, deeper, moving towards healing? How do we even do it when you've got one side just weaponizing this incredible tragedy to go after the left? I mean, I this week for me just hit really hard.
Yeah. And these are the types of moments in which this is where you look for leaders to lead. This is where you look for that bright light in the darkness. And it's sad to say that we just aren't seeing that from this administration. And that's not me being partisan. That's not me being, regardless of whether I like Donald Trump or not.
Yeah, no, you want the American president. In
exactly
these
right.
moments, you want the
To
president
bring us together.
to succeed for the sake of the country, right?
Yeah.
The election isn't this year. We'll have plenty of time to fight them in 26, 28. But the point is, you want there not to be more violence.
Yes.
You want there not to be more hatred. You want the president to just say, obviously, it was horrific that someone was gunned down, assassinated while they were exchanging ideas at a university, and we've got to tone down the rhetoric. We all have to be better. We need to respect each other as American citizens. And instead, he uses the speech to basically call for vengeance against the left. We're debating pointlessly who has more violence, the left or the right. Like, who cares? Like, the point is, what are we going to do to have some kind of shared citizenship, some kind of shared purpose, some kind of healing? And there's so few voices in this administration, almost none, talking about it. And then they're going after speech.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going after, for all the criticisms of them saying we regulate hate speech, they're talking about anything that's critical of the Trump regime as hate speech that they're going to prosecute. And Miller is out there talking about destroying left-wing networks. And then you have, one of my friends, Jonathan Jackson, sent me this picture of this young black man hanging. And now I read the report, and they don't know if it was suicide or not, but you just have this fear of what's going on in this country. And then all the HBCUs that had to shelter in place. You read about
Hampton,
Hampton.
number in Virginia.
What did they have to do with Charlie Kirk? And I think it should be possible to hold two contradictory thoughts in your mind. One, that Charlie Kirk's murder and assassination was totally uncalled for, should be condemned unconditionally, no justification.
There's no place for that.
No place. And secondly, you could say that we're not going to hold up Charlie Kirk as a model of how you practice democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're saying things like Michelle Obama and Justice Jackson and others don't have the brain power to do the job, and when you're saying that Indians shouldn't be allowed to immigrate into the United States, and when you're using that kind of language, of course, you should be allowed to go to universities. Of course, there should be not political violence. But we shouldn't be sort of celebrating this as, well, this is the way to reach young men. Really? That's the way to reach young men? I think the way to reach young men is to figure out, how do we provide hope, aspiration, jobs, things like what President Obama did?
Mm-hmm.
How do we actually move them forward? Not how do we engage in that kind of hate? And I mean, we'll see what people think, but I don't see why you can't have both of those thoughts.
Congressman, let's imagine you were president or vice president right now. What would you have done, or what would you do in order to try to bring the country together?
One, I would have spoken about the violence that we are facing as a nation and how it has affected both people on the right, from Donald Trump's attempted assassination to Steve Scalise to Charlie Kirk, and has also affected people on the left, the Minnesota state legislator who was shot to death, Governor Shapiro, whose house faced arson, Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, was hit by a hammer. And that we have too rich an inheritance in this country. Too many people have sacrificed in this country for us to be engaged in that cycle of violence. Mm-hmm. And we all need to do things better. And then I would have talked about something that I may have said, or some tweet I may have put out, that I said, you know what? I hold myself to that standard. And I've got to do better here. And I'd like all of us to think about how all of us can be better. How do we take this moment to be to be better leaders? And then I would go to a conservative campus and a place where they're honoring Kirk, and I would go to an HBCU where there's fair, and I would go to both liberal and conservative places, and maybe I would try to hold a town hall with bringing people of different persuasions together, and maybe you have an honest conversation about Kirk, about the why people saw him on the right as a figure that they were drawn to, and why so many people on the left and others were hurt by what he said, and to have that conversation. Those are things that I think any thoughtful president would have, or vice president would have done. I think Vice President Harris would have done that. I think President Obama would have done that. I think President Biden would have done that. I think Ronald Reagan would have maybe.
George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, and they
Right.
and I think there were moments in which they did bring the country together, right? To unite, so that we're not thinking about Democrat versus Republican, but we're all Americans at this juncture, and we got to address this darkness that is just spreading across this nation. I mean, it breaks my heart. And I mean, you have kids,
Yeah.
I have kids, and I just think about what type of world are we raising our kids in right now, right?
It's a sad world. I mean, with the school shootings
Yes.
every week, with the violence that the country is facing, with the anger and the division, and the political class, we're failing the country.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we've got to figure out how do we turn this around? How do we offer some kind of affirmative vision that inspires people? And I'll tell you, the answer is not let's have our version of Donald Trump. I mean, we've had many leaders in this country. The answer isn't, okay, how do we figure out our way of mocking him and ridiculing him and tearing down MAGA? Why? Why should we model ourselves over one of the worst presidents in human history? Why not model ourselves after FDR and John F. Kennedy and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, at least in their temperament? And I'm not saying people don't have policy disagreements, but they inspired the nation. They moved the nation forward. And I think there's such a hunger for this in this country, for people in our party who's going to move the country forward, who's going to find some kind of healing, some kind of shared purpose, some kind of shared citizenship. That's what I think the country wants.
I agree with you on that. And I think there are a lot of folks, particularly Democrats, who just want to see the party fight back.
Sure.
And I'm not saying fight in terms of a physical fight.
No.
But I'm saying in terms of standing up for the things that we value, not only as a party, but mostly important, I think what we value as a nation, right? Some of the things that the founders of this nation hope that we could aspire to be, right? And there's been a lot of talk about, well, are Democrats doing enough to fight back, to push back? What's your thought on that? And if you don't think we're doing enough, what do you think we need to be doing?
Well, I think when people say fight, they mean fight for principle, fight for something we stand for.
Yes.
I don't think they mean let's match J.D. Vance's rant with our own rant about how we're going to exact and blame the right wing. I don't think they mean let's tweet out in Donald Trump's language. I think they say, well, what is the party fighting for? And I got to be honest, I think in the beginning we were a little bit not at our best because we were so shell-shocked that we lost 7 states. So we did things. Some people voted for Lake and Riley, and that gave the authority to deport without due process. We gave them votes for this government funding to continue. But I think the Democrats now are finding their voice and they're finding their footing. And they're saying, for example, on this budget issue, we're not going to give you any votes if you're going to take away health care, if you're going to make it that every American who's on the exchanges is going to have an 80% increase in their health care premiums. We're not going to be part of that. We're not going to be part of taking away Medicaid funding. We're not going to be part of taking away vaccines from folks. You do it on your own. The Democrats aren't going to be part of it. We're not going to be part of militarizing our streets. You see Governor Moore, Governor Pritzker, Governor Newsom standing up saying, no, Not going to have that happen. And we're not going to be part of a blank check where you have Rubio going to Netanyahu and say, just go kill more people in Gaza. No. We're not going to be part of more military weapons into Israel that are being used to kill civilians. You see a party starting to find a moral conviction, a moral voice, and also a party that that universally condemned, at least the elected officials, the Kirk killing, and are saying, how do we find a way to reconciliation? And I see the emergence of a party finding its moral voice.
Do you agree? I mean, and one of the things that you mentioned is there's some people right now who are celebrating Gavin Newsom, like using that same language going back. Is that sort of where you think we go, or you're saying there's a different path or a different chart?
There's a different path. Look, that has a place, and the governor is trying to support redistricting efforts in California. I support that. We've got to, we've got to use every procedural tool to stop the president who's unconstitutional. But that I don't think is the way forward. I mean, when I look at what has moved this country, John F. Kennedy, Barack Obama, President Clinton, Bernie Sanders, I think it's building a movement that offers an alternative vision, that is speaking to people saying 70% of Americans say the American dream is dead. What are we going to do to provide good paying jobs? What are we going to do to actually make a difference on childcare, on the health care costs? What are we going to do to heal this country and to show that America can still work? I mean, Jimmy, we were talking about Jim Clyburn. Too many people have gone to jail. My grandfather went to jail in India fighting British colonialism so that my parents could come here so I could have this kind of life. So many people have sacrificed.
Yeah.
And the ultimate betrayal of the American promise, the ultimate defeat to Donald Trump, is to allow him to set a vision of a divided nation that is spiraling downwards. The defeat of Trumpism is a defeat of cynicism. It is a defeat of despair. It's a defeat of the forces that say destroy it all because it hasn't been working, and is to offer some affirmative vision that we can get behind. And it's a harder challenge, but it's the one that I hope the Democrats will take up.
Speaking of failure right now of our system, I think about the body in which I love, but you are currently a member of, which is the House of Representatives.
So you spent time there.
Yes, I spent some time in the House. I'm still one of those folks that when that dome is lit up at night, I still get goosebumps.
Oh, I do too.
Walking through Statuary Hall and being in that space where all of the great debates, all of this, whether or not the nation will be a slave or free, like all of that in that very very special place to this nation. And I see Mike Johnson and the MAGA Republicans, and I see what they have done to that body.
Yeah.
How do you get stuff done in Congress? Is anything actually getting done in Congress right now under this MAGA leadership?
No. I mean, other than tax breaks for billionaires and taking away Medicaid. But you're right. I mean, I think you and I probably have a deep appreciation for the Capitol because I don't know your whole life story, but neither of us were predestined to be there.
Yes.
There's some people, they're like, I don't begrudge them, but they're like the third in their family to serve, and their father was a congressman or grandfather was a state senator, and they always kind of had this plan. When I was 21 years old and I was interning, someone said, well, Ro, you're kind of really good at this policy stuff. One day you should go work for someone, because of course an Indian American of Hindu faith can never get elected in this country, right? Wow. That was pre-Obama. And then Obama changed everything. And so every day I go into that Capitol, I say, wow, this is a miracle that I'm here. This is a miracle of this nation that people are here. And the building is supposed to inspire you to be your best. That was why that's supposed to be majestic. And it's desecrated every day. But there's been such little common ground. The only place where I've had any luck on common ground is the release of these Epstein files, where, that Marjorie Taylor Greene came to our press conference,
which is,
was so moved. She gave me a hug at the press conference. I said, Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
As we say in the South, even a broken clock is right twice a day.
If President Biden was still there, I would have sent him a picture. I'd said, Mr. President, next State of the Union, Marjorie Taylor Greene, because the president. One of the things I admired about President Biden is, and one of the words that stuck with me was actually at one of the House conferences, and someone said, "Mr. President, what's your political advice?" He said, "Well, I don't have much advice to give you guys, but there's one piece of advice I'll share because you asked." And he said, "I always fought with conviction, but I never made it personal. I never attacked people personally. I tried to stay away from that." And, it stuck with me all these years. And so I thought about that when this moment where we've got Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie and Lauren Boebert, and they've shown on this issue courage. And if it weren't for each of those signatures, we wouldn't get to 218, and maybe we get the Epstein files released and stand with survivors.
Do you think you're going to get you're one short?
One short.
Do you think?
One short.
Do you have a whip? My job used to be floor director in the whip's office. Do you have a whip list of members that you are focusing on and targeting?
We do.
We
got 4 or 5 Republicans, but we've got a good fortune of having a vacancy in Arizona that is Representative Grijalva's former seat, great member of Congress.
Yeah.
And that person is going to be sworn in on September 29th.
And that will be the one
that will be the 218th signature.
Wow.
So you were in the House. You know how rare this is to get a discharge petition. And it may be the first time that I can remember that a Republican House is going to actually have a vote that's against Donald Trump. And I think it'll be more than 218 votes. When
I guarantee you that if this bill gets to the floor, I'm quite certain that you will get more than 218 votes for it.
And that'll be a big, big statement. I mean, it'll be a big statement
huge.
For survivors. It'll be a big statement for protecting children, but it'll be a big statement of Donald Trump. But finally, the fever broke, and MAGA folks standing up and voting against him. So I've spent a lot of energy this month on that.
Well, and Republicans are saying the Democrats are doing this because they're trying to find something on Donald Trump. Is that your motivation? What was your motivation?
Look, my motivation on this, when I did this with Thomas Massie, I actually thought this would be kind of a bipartisan thing because Trump ran on it. Vance ran on it. And it's remarkable to me that he's trying to squelch this so much. Does anyone really think Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to get Donald Trump, or Lauren Boebert wants to get Donald Trump, or Nancy Mace wants to get Donald Trump? It's absurd. It's simply a view that the rich and powerful in this country shouldn't get to play by one set of rules, while a group of people, young women, are discarded and abandoned. It's about 2 Americas, and most Americans think that the government doesn't work, that it's rigged, that if you happen to have powerful friends in D.C., if you happen to be rich, you can skirt the rules. And for someone like me who wants to do big things like Medicare for all, or a wealth tax, or a livable wage, you got to have people trust government. That's really what motivated me. And I said, okay, we get the Epstein files out. We hold these rich and powerful people accountable. We stand for survivors. Maybe we start to restore trust. It's never really been about Donald Trump, but people listen to the testimonials of the women. There were people who voted for Donald Trump, and they're pleading, as he's calling them a hoax. They're saying, please just meet with us. Yeah. That they didn't have any anti-Trump sentiment. And it's just sad to me that they're unable to break through to him.
I just read recently some of the transcripts from some of these young women who were victimized, who are survivors of just heinous sexual abuse, and it just breaks your heart. And it breaks your heart that members of Congress aren't all unified. You shouldn't have to do a discharge petition in order to do what's right.
14-year-old girls, junior high, not only being assaulted or raped, but then told, go recruit your friends so that you can come, so that they can give Epstein a massage and that they could be farmed out. And they're in tears saying this. And what has happened in our country that we can't just say, yeah, we're going to stand to protect young girls in America. But it's become politicized. Yeah. And then people saying, well, the Democrats should have done this earlier. Who cares? You got the survivors. We can have justice. And you're arguing about when it should have been done.
Are you going to do the right thing now?
Yeah, do it now. Yeah. You this is the whole thing you've been raising. And I give credit to some of the MAGA voices who've been consistent about this, who are calling for this. And I said it took survivors of horrific rape in this country to say something that had any ability to bring this country together.
Ghislaine Maxwell, having her move from a prison that I don't know if it's some kind of like Met Club type thing or situation. Like, what's the justification? Have you all had Pam Bondi or anybody to testify to say why that actually happened? Like
No.
Somebody who's committed or, accused of committing such heinous acts. It seems like we shouldn't be looking at downgrading or making them more comfortable in terms of their prison sentences.
Well,
right?
Accused and convicted, and they didn't ask the survivors or the survivors' lawyers, and the survivors, in fact, were so outraged that they went off of what they had prepared, off their scripts and off their prepared testimony, to make it clear that they did not want Maxwell to be released or to be given any leniency because she was part of the abuse. But you have, the president's personal lawyer meeting with her, she flattering Donald Trump, trying to get a pardon. The whole thing is just corrupt.
Yeah.
And people are seeing that, and they're seeing that there's something that they're trying to hide in all of this. And by the way, it's totally not partisan. The first person to be fired out of this whole saga was the British ambassador, who was someone from the Labour Party, close to the former Prime Minister Blair, and he had emailed saying that he didn't think Epstein should be sentenced to jail. And we released them.
Yep.
The oversight released them. We didn't have any sympathy for that. So, what are these folks hiding? That for years they've been saying, all Democratic politicians, that was their mantra.
Yeah.
But now they're there, and suddenly they don't want to release it.
The knots in that these Republicans have been twisting themselves in about the letter that the Donald Trump letter that was sent in, I guess, the whole file of birthday notices or congratulations or what have you. Do you think it's real?
Well, the lawyers think it's real. Does anyone think that someone would just make that up and send it to Epstein's?
It's the weirdest thing. I'm going to make it something up. I'm going to pretend to be Donald Trump.
Right.
I'm going to try to sign his signature in the way that he was. And
but to me, it just says, okay, if you can't believe the White House on this, we can't believe on anything. Just release the files.
Just release the files.
That's how you settle all of this.
They're on Pam Bondi's desk, right?
Yeah, exactly. And people say, well, how do we know we're going to get the real thing? Because the victims' lawyers have seen it. So if we don't get the real thing, they're going to speak up. But just release it. And I actually don't even think it's necessarily stuff about Trump that's preventing this. That's what makes me even more concerned. Who is he trying to protect? Because, the people with the whole birthday book and that letter, we had Access Hollywood. It's not, this is baked in.
Yeah.
People don't think Donald Trump is a saint. They voted for him anyway. The reason this is so devastating is because he said, look, I'm not the Pope or some person of virtue, but I'm going to go and expose everyone else. And I'm going to tear this down and get these rich and corrupt folks. I'm one of them in terms of being rich and powerful, and I'm going to turn on them. And he hasn't done that. He's protecting folks. And so that's what's driving people mad in his own base. Like, you said you were going to do this. Vance is on Theo Von and all these podcasts. We're going to do this. Where is his voice now?
Yeah. Ro, you have, in addition to this issue, you are really at the center of some of the biggest policy discussions right now in the country. You are the main author of a letter calling for the recognition of Palestine as a state. What motivated you to draft this letter? Why are you taking the lead on this particular issue?
Well, I have a deep commitment to human rights because of my upbringing, because my grandfather was with Gandhi for years in fighting for India's independence. Twice went to jail. And I sometimes say, well, all the problems start with the British. The British are the ones who messed up the Middle East. There were the Balfour Declaration and the British Mandate. But when I was young, I wanted to work at the United Nations. That's what I never thought necessarily go into politics, but I wanted to be part of an international human rights lawyer. My first campaign, which was a protest campaign in politics, was against the Iraq War. I got 19%, but it was the first anti-Iraq War primary in the country. So this is standing up for human rights is in my blood. I interned at the Carter Center and was really honored when President Carter supported me when I ran for Congress in 2016. And so I looked at what was going on and horrified. And what horrifies me the most, other than the deaths of civilians, and they're just today when we're talking, they're going into Gaza, killing more. What horrified me even more is the attempt to totally erase Palestinian identity. They're trying to push out the Palestinians from Gaza. They're trying to annex more land in the West Bank. And so we need to stop the military sales to Israel that are being used to kill civilians, but we also need to affirm the Palestinian aspirations for a Palestinian state. We have to say, no, Israel, you can't just erase Palestinian identity. You can't just push them into Egypt or Jordan. And we're going to join with France, with Britain, with Canada, with Australia, and 147 other countries to actually recognize the Palestinian state. And that to me is now becoming actually a more mainstream position. Actually, I have one more point of this. I spoke at the Council of Foreign Relations, and some guy came up and said, well, bro, this was false advertising. I said, why is it false advertising? You said you have all these new ideas. This is the same thing that George W. Bush said, 2 states and a Palestinian state. So this is not some radical concept.
Yeah. So, and the letter was originally leaked.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Why do you think it was leaked? What do you think the goal of the leaker was in terms of releasing the letter?
Well, you know how people work on the Hill. They wanted AIPAC and others to weigh in, and they wanted to prevent other members from getting on. If anything, it backfired. Suddenly members were like, what is that letter I read about? And started asking me about the letters. We have over 30 signatures already on this letter, and I'm pretty confident we're going to get to 50. It's been endorsed by a lot of groups, including J Street. We had a good discussion with the 90-plus member Congressional Progressive Caucus today. And so this is something that whose time has come.
Yeah, and I think this issue within the caucus, though, is one that you have a lot of varying thoughts and opinions on. And you have some Democrats right now who are very wary of wading in right now. Why do you think that is?
It's a difficult issue. Obviously, it's an emotional issue. It's an issue that doesn't make you a lot of friends. I mean, you get criticized from all sides when you take a position. And there are a lot of issues closer to home where people say, I've got a concern about people losing health care, people losing jobs, the cost of burgers, the cost of groceries. But I'll tell you is that this has to go to our moral core, who we are as Americans. And it's our complicity in this with the military weapons that is turning off a lot of Americans, including young Americans. And so if our sense is that the answer to Trump, the antidote to Trump, is statesmanship, is morality, is non-transactional politics, is principle and conviction, then you can't just say that about how we treat each other here at home. You have to say also about how America acts in the world. And that's why I think this matters. And I hope that more of our party will start to see this as the moral issue it is, that our support of Israel at this time is just not justifiable.
Do you think there is a place where someone could say, I'm against Netanyahu because I don't like his particular policies. I support Israel and Israel's defense, but I also believe in Palestine and the safety and the health of the Palestinian people. Is that where you see yourself?
Yeah.
Or yes?
Yeah. I mean, I support Israel's right to exist as a democratic Jewish homeland. I always have. I've been to Israel 3 times as a member of Congress. Our iPhones have technology from Israel. I mean, Silicon Valley is deeply integrated with Israel. But I don't think we should be giving them military weapons to kill civilians. That does not mean that we shouldn't be giving them Iron Dome or things that they need to prevent an attack from Iran. that means that we shouldn't be giving them more bombs to go kill people in Gaza City. And that's what the Sanders Amendment was, which the majority of Democratic senators supported. That's what Delia Ramirez's bill is, that now 60, 70 Democrats in the House are supporting. And so that's not a position that is punitive on Israel. That's a position that says that Israel itself looked at itself as being a moral nation, and they're not living up to being a moral nation right now, and that we need for them to stop this killing, to release the hostages so that there can be the release of the hostages. Hamas released those hostages, and that we actually have peace. And that peace is going to come with the help of the Arab League.
I want to go back and talk a little bit more about the House of Representatives. We sort of mentioned earlier that one of the big things that's coming down the pike is this continuing resolution, how to fund our government. And, the House is led by Speaker Mike Johnson. And during my time, I've seen some good speakers, the greatest of all time, Nancy Pelosi, and I've seen some not so good speakers. I think of Dennis Hastert as one when you think about that's just places a stain on the body. Where do you define Mike Johnson?
I feel he's been co-opted by Donald Trump. I know Mike Johnson. We came into Congress together. I remember Mike Johnson when we were in Congress saying he's not the loudest guy. And he said, look, we should all do a civility pledge. Let's be decent. I know his family. I've met his family in the lunchroom. When he passes me in the hallways, he's always, oh, Ro, you're killing us on Fox News. He's he's not a bomb thrower. But the problem is that he basically has given his speakership to Donald Trump. He was moved with the testimonials. He spent 2 hours listening to these women on the Epstein case. And he doesn't think it's a hoax. He knows it's not a hoax. And yet he's out there doing Trump's bidding, And so that to me is the tragedy. I view him as it's almost a Greek tragedy, as a person of decency and civility. Now, if you're a Republican, you're basically a lieutenant for Trump. And if you're not a lieutenant for Trump, you won't have your job. And I think it's important for people to understand that, how much Trump has taken over the Republican Party. When I got there, it was Trump's first election, the Republican members of Congress would laugh at him. Paul Ryan, others, they'd laugh at him and they'd say kind of, well, it was a fluke,
Yeah.
But now, no, this has become, Donald Trump is far, far stronger today in his grip over the Republican Party than his first term. It's just night and day.
What do you think the future of the Republican Party is?
It is Trumpism to be squashed and defeated decisively by our party. But we're going to face Trumpism until we defeat it decisively.
Yeah.
And the future is going to be a J.D. Vance, Don Jr., that tradition of Trumpism. And it's Trumpism without even kind of the humor or TV charm, right? I mean, it's just kind of this anger. That's what I was struck by with Vance. And I've known him a bit before he became vice president, but there was just this anger. It's like own the libs is their mantra. It's like you go into politics and they're so in this echo chamber about own the libs, not like how do we get people good jobs? How are we going to make sure that people have health care? How are we going to make sure that this country comes together? It's like the enemy is the libs. The enemy for people's despair and lack of hope and deindustrialization and the lack of the American dream and us not doing as well against China is all the libs. It's the Democrats. That's who they've made the enemy. Them and the immigrants and the trans people. And it's all about, well, now if we can just get that, your life would be better. And I was talking about that King passage where King says, we'll feed Jim Crow to the white man who may not have enough to eat and enough jobs. Well, this is an updated version. We'll feed an anger at immigrants. We'll feed an anger at the left, and then you will forget that the American dream isn't possible for you. But the way to answer that is to offer people a real path and a real hope.
When thinking about, and speaking of hope, I often say the superpower of the Democratic Party is and has been and still is hope. And hopefully we can, in these next elections coming up, we can we can add a little more oxygen to that flame,
Yeah.
so that the flame is rising again. And I want to spend a little time talking about the future of the Democratic Party. What do you think that the Democratic Party needs to do to win back the trust of Americans? Because all the polling says that people don't trust the Democratic Party right now to fight for them, to stand up for them. That the party is not aligned with their values. What do you believe? What is your vision for us to rebuild and regain that trust again?
We've got to start speaking from a place of conviction, to be unafraid to talk about the inequality that exists in this country. So I often joke around. First thing I often say is, I represent more billionaires than anyone on the planet. There are 5 companies over $1 trillion in my district. We're worth $14 trillion, this 50-mile radius, more wealth than has ever been produced anywhere. And I'm for taxing these folks more. I'm for a wealth tax. How is this a hard vote for 434 other members of Congress? We need to be willing to say we're for taxing wealth, for a wealth tax. We need to be willing to say we're for national health insurance, Medicare for all, so everyone has health care from the day they're born, that we're for a living wage and that we're going to fight to get a living wage for folks, that we're for child care at $10 a day, that we have enough money in this country to make sure people have a dignified life, that we're going to tackle the 10-to-1 wealth gap between Black and white Americans by recognizing that there are a lot of people who are being excluded from modern wealth generation and the technology revolution. And shame on us for that. We're going to actually build partnerships and investments so that every community has the ability to participate in the technology revolution and digital revolution, that we're going to have a vision for the economic success of every family, every community in America, and that we know how to do it, that Donald Trump's offering 1980s. He's a 1980s guy offering 19th century stuff. Like, and if he was born in James Polk's era, maybe he could have taken Texas. But, does anyone really think we're going to conquer Canada and Greenland and that's going to build wealth? Take it from the guy whose district is producing more wealth than anywhere. That's not how you build modern wealth. Our party knows how you build modern wealth and economic security, and we're going to do that in every community, and we're going to be unafraid to have some unorthodox ideas.
So I agree with a lot of that. I think part of, though, the challenge that we have is that in our party, we are still fighting old battles amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest battle, most recent battle, that we are still fighting, I mean, to this very day, I can get on the web and see it, is the battle coming out of the 2016 presidential election.
Still, huh? You think that's still raw?
It is still, in many people's minds, a fervent battle. People are saying to this day, the DNC stole the election, Bernie versus Hillary. It is still a huge battle. So, Ro, how do we say that is history, and now we are looking to the future? The Republicans they're good at certain things, and one of the things they are very good at is playing on the divisions that we have on our side. They will play us. They will play us against each other all the time. They will fan the flames. Their billionaires will pump dark money into making sure that the divisions stay there.
Right.
And maybe the battles that I see online are the bots that they paid for, right? To go back and forth, to trigger you, to trigger other folks.
Or foreign bots.
Or foreign bots. Yeah. I think foreign entities are helping to fan the flames as well. So how do we bridge that divide? Is it just changing names? So for instance, instead of you saying Medicare for all, because Medicare for all triggers certain people, right? It goes back to that 2016 divide. Or am I with Hillary's healthcare or am I with Bernie's healthcare, right? Maybe it is figuring something out that has great things about it, but you call it something different, right? Just so that we can, again, end the divisions that are there. Tell me, how do you, because you are a leader in our party, what's your recipe for how we bring unity? We can't even bring unity to America until we bring unity within the Democratic Party.
I appreciate your point. I make that point all the time.
Yeah.
I said, this country wants the next party in power to help unify America. But how are they going to think we can unify America when we can't even unify the party?
Yes.
Anyone to prove that you can heal the divide between the blue and the red in America is going to first have to prove that they could heal the divide within the blue in America.
Yeah.
And I think that the worst way to look at future leadership in this party, whether it's 26 or 28, is to have some narrow conception about lanes.
Yes.
This is my lane.
Yes.
I guarantee you're not going to be the leader of a party if you take that approach. Then I'm going to be a lane candidate, because this party is too incredible, too diverse, too big, too broad. It has progressive as in the Northeast, and it has people of more moderate temperament in some of the Black South, and it's got progressives in the Black South, and it's got Latinos and Asian Americans and white working class, and it's an incredibly broad party. And the people who have win the nomination, or people who lead as speaker or as majority leader, speak to that broad base. So I come from a background of, I worked for President Obama, a junior guy, but I worked for him as his deputy assistant secretary in his Commerce Department. I worked on his very first campaign as a student at University of Chicago, and he was running for the state Senate. And I was proud to co-chair Bernie Sanders' campaign. And I have respect and admiration for President Clinton. I was an intern in 1995 there, and have a lot of respect for Secretary Clinton and what she did. And I guess what I would say is that we need a contestation of ideas. So it's fine if someone says, Ro, I don't agree with you on the wealth tax, or I don't agree with Medicare for all, even though I believe that you can have private insurance as supplemental and call it national health insurance, or call it whatever. But, I don't agree with you there. And I don't agree with your child care $10 a day, or I don't agree with you that the Pentagon budget is too big. But, we all agree that we got to raise the wage, and we all agree that we got to raise taxes on the very, very wealthy in some way. And we all agree that the science funding needs to be restored. And let's have that have that fight and that argument, and then rally around whoever our leader is. In the House, it's clear it's going to be Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker of the House. I don't understand these people. Look, I've endorsed Mamdani, but I don't understand these people taking gratuitous shots at Hakeem for their own profile. Like, the guy's going to be the Speaker. And by the way, if you have any understanding of the Democratic Party, I'll just be some real talk here. Pissing off the CBC ain't the way to go. You're not going to get past the square one. If you, I'm just real talk.
No, it's real talk.
And Hakeem he's got more than the CBC, but he's got the CBC. I was in Tunica with Hakeem on stage, and you got Benny on one side and Clyburn on the other, and you got Hakeem in the middle. And if you're foolish enough to think that you're going to be in any form of leadership with screwing around with that, well, I just question your political skills. I mean, so that may be the clip out of this, but we have real talk in this party.
And I think what it represents, right? We know that the most loyal base of the Democratic Party consistently has been the African American community. Here we have an opportunity for someone who, with a great background, a great story, who is trying to unify his caucus, meaning he's not going to take the most polarizing positions on all these things, because being a leader of the caucus, that is a very diverse caucus, you're always trying to bring your caucus together.
Yeah.
You're trying to find that common ground so that you can eventually get to the 218 to pass a legislation that benefits the entire nation.
It's a different role than running for president.
That's
or
exactly
running for
right.
Governor or senator.
That's exactly right.
His job is different.
Yes, it is bringing together this. It's a much more unifying thing. I really do think that we have to figure out, and I would say for folks who are thinking about 2028, is how do we unify this caucus? I see the divisions right now with Mamdani running in New York, and there are a lot of folks who are they're pissed off. They don't like the Democratic Socialists of America because they've gone after them on certain things, and not even specific about him, but because his affiliation with this group it's an automatic response, an automatic filter that I'm not even going to listen to what he has to say because I'm automatically, if he's affiliated with this pocket or this group, then I don't have to deal anything with him.
Now they got to read a little bit more history, right? I mean, I think Mamdani is a very talented guy who's going to add a lot more to our party than subtract. And so I don't make this in any comparison with Mamdani. But FDR, he had this guy, Representative Rankin, who basically did the Tennessee Valley Authority. And Rankin was a raging anti-Semite, and he was a raging segregationist. And there was a coalition that he put together on getting that through. And Lyndon Johnson, FDR, of course, had a blind spot for the South, as you know, and Lyndon Johnson helped fix it. But they worked in coalitions. I remember there was this whole uproar with the debate when Biden said that he worked with some South Carolina senator, right?
Strom Thurmond.
And at the end of the day, what the polling within the Democratic primary showed is people didn't think that meant that Biden
was a
racist.
Yeah.
They thought that what that meant is Biden was trying to bridge divides in the same way that Jim Clyburn did, in the same way John Lewis did, in the same way at the highest level that Martin Luther King did, right? And so I think that the question for our party has got to be, we've got to work broadly. You judge people based on where they stand. You know that we're imperfect, but we've got to figure out how do we start to bridge these divides without compromising our values, and debate the ideas. Criticize my policy. Criticize me for saying, "Hey, Ro, how does your math work? How does Medicare for all really work?" Criticize that, but don't put me in some camp. Oh, he was Bernie's co-chair, so he must automatically not be on our side. Well, yeah. What about the part where I I start with President Clinton or I work for Barack Obama? Right? People are more complex than that.
Yes, and it's part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast because many times we see in the media and we see with our limited interactions on social media, whatever, that folks become caricatures.
Yeah.
Right. You have to fit neatly in one box. Right. And based on you fitting in that one box, I'm going to judge you based on the color of the box that you are in. Right. Everything that I know about that color, I'm going to apply to you, regardless of whether or not that is actually who you are.
Right.
Right. Regardless if it's actually what you fully believe. But we are not spending the time to get to know people enough to understand their fears, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. Right. We don't get that time because we are taking that one little snippet and we are going to judge based off of that one little snippet. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is so that we get an opportunity to actually have conversation. And when you have those conversations, maybe you move from somebody. Maybe you're able to persuade them to get them to move, to see the things in the way that you see it, or to at least appreciate the perspective that you're bringing to the table.
Well, I love the conversation. This has made me think of something which I don't think I've shared before, because most people think, okay, the most defining part of you is being progressive, and I'm proud of being progressive, very proud of it, very proud of co-chairing Bernie's campaign. But the most defining part of me is actually probably being Indian American and the story of my grandfather and his fight for Indian independence. And the thing I'm proudest of, that you come into my office, the first thing you see is this op-ed I did with the late John Lewis about the interlinking of Gandhi's independence movement and the civil rights movement. And without that, my parents wouldn't have been allowed to be in America. The 65 Immigration Act comes out of the civil rights movement that lets my parents immigrate. And the only people at that time who hired Indian Americans were HBCUs. I taught at Stanford. They didn't hire Indians back then. Harvard didn't. And so the reason I share all this is because when I was a progressive co-chair and I was first going down to Mississippi to do some of this work with HBCUs in South Carolina, someone who I won't say said, "Ro, you realize you're a progressive. Why are you wasting your time down there? Why they're never gonna really be for someone like you." And I have found the warmest reception actually down south because my story resonates and emotional. They don't look at Ro Khanna, Medicare for all. They think, okay, Ro Khanna, his grandfather fought in the same freedom struggle that our parents and grandparents fought in, and he gets it, and he has gratitude for his life story, for the sacrifices we made. And so this is where I'm saying we got to be outside our boxes.
Yeah. See, this is the one thing that I think the DC political consultant pundit class don't get about folks and voters. And particularly, I would, and I'm going to speak specifically, not that the Black community is a monolith, but about Black voters in particular. It is that many of these voters are not on the ideology scale, right? From progressive and liberal and conservative and people make up all these goddamn names, neoliberal and stuff that I got to look up in the damn folks. If you went to my grandma and said, "Oh yeah, well, Miss Harrison, I think Miss Jimmy Lou, I think you are," she like, what? Did you drink a little bit of? You must have got some of that moonshine that somebody got back there. Like they'd think you got three heads because normal people don't talk that way. Normal people don't think that way.
Yeah.
And the voters, particularly Black voters, I would say in South Carolina, they are not. It's not about them being conservative. It's not about them being progressive. They're pragmatic.
Yeah.
And in the end of the day, what they want to know is, will you fight for me?
Yeah.
Will you stand up for me? What are your values?
And do they feel
do you see
right?
me?
Yeah.
Do you hear me? Do you feel me?
Yeah.
Right? That is the thing that they judged these candidates by. And so I tell everybody, come through, but you better be your authentic self because they can smell bullshit. They can smell bullshit. We know what pig shit smells like. We know what bullshit smells like too. And that is the thing that I tell folks when you're coming down to South Carolina, understand that. And that's different than in some of these other places.
Well,
right?
and this is I think another thing that I think is insulting to Black voters down south, which is if you go to a state like New Hampshire, which is a great state, or Iowa, they'll say, well, these voters are thoughtful and fair, and no one else would say, okay, you're Indian, so they won't give you a chance as much. But when people talk about the Black South, they're like, well, aren't they just going to vote for a Black candidate? Aren't they just going to vote for a Southern candidate? Give me a break. Give me a break, right? Like, you don't think that Black voters are capable of
being thoughtful,
deliberative,
yeah,
and actually seeing people. And so I think that these are the stereotypes that people have and need to break down.
Well,
but I'll tell you this: that any coalition, not just to win, but for the healing of this country, for moving this country forward, has got to take the Black South not just seriously, but to understand the moral conscience that it's provided.
For anybody who has any sense about politics has to understand this, is that the future of the Democratic Party is in the South.
Yeah.
When you look at where the census is going, the
Georgia,
reverse migration is now taking place.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Black folks, and Clyburn will give this history lesson all the time. Black folks whose forefathers and foremothers went to Michigan and went to Illinois, went to New York and Pennsylvania. Many of the progeny of those folks are now coming back down south.
Is that the case? I didn't know this.
They're coming back to North Carolina. They're going back to Georgia. They're going to Mississippi and Alabama, right?
Yeah.
And so it's starting to modify and change the politics in those states as well. And Georgia is at the tipping spear of that, right? North Carolina, we see it as well. And so folks...
You think Georgia or North Carolina is an easier state for us long term?
I think Georgia right now.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of work that we still need to do in the rural communities. And people need to understand that rural America does not equal white America.
That's for sure.
I mean, you've been to rural South Carolina, and you know that there's some rural counties in South Carolina that are majority Black counties. And what we do is we, as a party, have focused all of our energy on the big cities, and we stop talking to people in rural communities. We've stopped talking in their language. We've stopped, expressing the things that they value, right? And rural communities are very different from urban communities, and so they want to know that you see them, hear them, and value them, and you're going to fight for them. And that's a really important thing for our folks to understand, that we need a rural outreach plan. We need to show. I
admired you when you ran for Senate, because they still, when I go down there, they say, "Well, Jamie was here. Jamie came here," right? I mean, and just coming and seeing showing up. That's the first step. And I applaud you, because you've been to South Carolina a lot, and people appreciate that. You've been there. I was just with the Claflin University president
which is one of the HBCUs we have in South Carolina. In my hometown of Orangeburg, there are 2 HBCUs in Orangeburg, Claflin and South Carolina State. And the president told me, he said, next time you see Congressman Ro Khanna, thank him. And I was like, oh, what? He said, he came to the campus with Congressman Clyburn and a few others. And what he has done is he brought some of the companies that are in his district, tech companies, and we have been working with them, and they have invested in our university. Personally, I just want to say thank you for that, right? Because that is transformational, not only for the region, my hometown, but for those young Black students at that university. They're now going to get opportunities that they might not have.
Well, we can do so much more, and President Warnock is huge. But there were 2 things that motivated me beyond the sense of gratitude I had that HBCUs were hiring Indian Americans, and now I saw Indian Americans have succeeded in technology. So it's coming full circle. And I thought, what if these freedom movements come together and we start working together? But I had a conversation. I was out there. I was saying, South Carolina made President Biden let him convene a summit with all these tech leaders and bring them to South Carolina. And Mr. Clyburn kind of saw me. He's like, Ro, you keep saying this. Why don't you just do something? I said, well, I'm not the president. He said, well, do what you can. And then I met Bishop Green. And Bishop Green, I gave him the whole spiel about how we need to do all of this. And he's no longer in South Carolina. He said, Ro, and I'm probably going to misquote him, but he said, even Jesus Christ needed receipts. I said, what do you mean? He said, when they said, are you the one? He said, do the blind not see? Do the lame not walk? Do the deaf not hear? He said, if Jesus Christ needed receipts, certainly politicians need receipts. Don't just talk about your vision, do something. And so we partnered with Jennifer Clyburn with not just HBCUs in South Carolina, 34 HBCUs, and we've set up several programs. Claflin's been the beneficiary of a few of them. Jackson State in Mississippi has things like a program with Google and OpenAI where kids get a $5,000 stipend, 10 hours a week course, $65,000 job at the end of 9 months. They're in the works of getting a partnership with NVIDIA. We did a partnership with Zoom. But I believe if we just got our technology leaders to figure out how to actually bring digital modern wealth generation to the Black South and take away advantage of the talent, the hard work, the drive, the ambition that would unleash prosperity for the country, and it would start to transform the economies of these places. And I guess the final point is just, I don't know if a politician is going to be able to get racism out of people's hearts or how much we can move the needle, but we certainly can move the needle in economics. And providing economic independence, economic empowerment, I think is one way we start to move the country forward.
Well, I think that's a really important thing, because in the end of the day, all of these communities, regardless of what the ethnic background is they want opportunity. They want to be able to provide for their families. They want to be able to, they want the future to be bright for their kids. And we know that technology is a linchpin right now for what that future might look like. And so I think your plan, and I know, we talked earlier and I thought was if Kamala Harris was president.
Well, I had a whole thing. I was going to pitch her on being Commerce Secretary. I had the whole plan. I said, we've done this program. You can scale it. You went to an HBCU at Howard. I've been working with these HBCUs. I was, I know I supported Sanders, but I was all out there for you and across Michigan and other places. I know the whole thing. And I thought election night she was going to win. I was surprised. I mean, now looking back at it, I understand it was a hard road. The time was short. There was inflation. There were issues, but I was. It took me a couple of weeks to get my bearings. I didn't expect it.
So let's talk a little bit about 2028.
Yeah.
So folks are noticing your travel records.
Well, that gets you talked about, right?
People are noticing that you're going to New Hampshire, you're in South Carolina. Have you been out to Nevada? Do you think you're going to run for president?
Oh, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, look, first of all, and I know this is typical, but it's actually true. I mean, we got to get Hakeem Jeffries to be speaker, because you want Mike Johnson in the House of Representatives certifying those elections. I mean, the big question is, are we going to have Donald Trump Jr. and J.D. Vance and a Speaker Johnson with the power to certify? Or are we going to have Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker so that we can have free and fair elections? And it matters who wins New Hampshire and South Carolina and other states. And so a lot of my focus has been on going to red districts. I mean, obviously, I've gone to South Carolina, but I've also gone to Nebraska and Pennsylvania and across California. And, we did this benefits over billionaires tour that took me to about 15 different states and to red districts that we can win. But I'll say this about 2028. We have some phenomenal talent in this party, a great bench of candidates, governors, senators, members of Congress, and it's going to be incredible. Whoever runs, we'll probably have 10, 15 people, and the country's hungry for that. And my hope is it'll be a forward-looking campaign. It'll be we're done with this mess. We've had, with due respect, we've had 3 80-year-old presidents in a row. Like now, it's time for a new generation of leadership and a vibrant leadership. And here's what we have to offer. And by the way, our problems are going to be so deep and so hard to solve that we're going to need everyone's talent. And one person will get to play quarterback, and then we're going to have everyone else play wide receiver and linebacker and have a team that is going to take this party forward. And so I often treat a lot of the people who are talked about with respect because I think you're going to need all of our talent. And I hope a lot of folks will get into a race and that we'll have that kind of vibrancy. Had Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Bill Richardson and John Edwards not run, we wouldn't have excited the party in that way.
Yeah.
And I think Bernie excited the party. I think Hillary excited the party. People, you don't give Hillary Clinton enough credit. There were people very excited about her candidacy. She won the popular vote. And, we need that kind of energy in our party. So that's all I'll say about 28, that it should be contested vigorously.
Yeah. Well, I really, as someone who's now witnessed and watched a number of presidential races, I think it's going to be a very important race for the future of the country, but I think an important race for the future of the Democratic Party as well. When I think about the Democratic Party, with all of its warts and all, I know the history of our party. I know our party has not always stood up for people who look like us.
Yeah.
I know how this party has evolved over time. I know how this party is not perfect. But, whomever is our party's nominee not only will be the next president, but they'll be the next head of the party. And one of the things that I see as of late, that I see right now in the body politic, I was just on Charlemagne's show just recently, and
you survived that?
Oh, good. I need some holy water. But you know what? I'm going to have Charlemagne sit his ass right in the seat.
That sounds great.
Charlemagne, I'm putting your ass in the hot seat next. But one of the things, as someone who's been a state party chair and again,
you bleed for this party. You bled for this party. You have.
Yes, I have, and I've taken many arrows, and the head, the ass, and everything else. But one of the things that bothers me, though, Speaker Pelosi would say people are just tinkling all over the party, and I'd say people are pissing over the party.
Yeah, I get it.
I think we are at a low ebb right now, but I believe in the comeback. We have been at low ebbs before. In 2004, we were at our lowest ebb, and we had the most masterful comeback ever, right? Because in 2006, we took back the House. We took back the Senate. In 2008, we took back the White House.
Yeah.
But
we had some of our most dynamic candidates.
We had some of our most dynamic candidates, but we also took our eye off of, it is not just about the candidates, it's about the party.
Yeah.
Right? Because when the party is strong, then the legacy of those candidates are also strong. The things that they fight for, the bills that they pass and they get enacted, that is sustained.
First of all, and I say this not with false humility,
Yeah.
I've seen the entire Democratic field. It's a great field. There's no Barack Obama.
No,
there's no one. Barack Obama was a singular talent in the way that Dr. King was a talent, in the way
Yes.
Frederick Douglass. I mean, he had a a gift,
Yes.
an oratorical gift, elegance. And there are very few people who can just transcend the party in that way. I think we have a lot of talent,
Yeah.
but I think any of the talent are going to need a strong, robust party to be able to both win and achieve their goals.
My bottom line message on this is, if you are thinking about 2028, and I will say this to every single one, and I'm not going to pull any punches on this, is the party is at its lowest ebb. You got some people who have given their heart and soul to this party, and they believe in this party, and they even despite the party not always believing in them or fighting for them, they still fight for the party. One of the things that is going to be really important for us is not to just don't kick a man when he's down.
No,
right?
I hear you.
It's about building the party and the people back up. Give them hope and faith, because our nominee will also be the head of our party. And
how do you balance? Because this is honest. How do you balance the need to be a change agent, right? Because the country was gonna say, look, we're done with the status quo. We want a new direction. We want a new vision. And our presidents, whether they've been Kennedy, Carter, Clinton, Obama, Biden was an exception, but largely have been change agents. Yeah. And so we're going to need, whether it's a Westmore, a Bashir, or we're going to want someone fresh, new, a change agent, and yet saying, look, we've had a great history as a party. I want to build it. It's you agree.
I totally agree with that. And I often say what I think the party needs now is a hopeful evolution.
I like that.
Right.
And I like your confidence too, because the reality is no one wants to elect a party or leaders who are saying, oh, the sky's falling down.
No.
Woe is me. The country is done. Democracy is done. You said, no, we're going to win. Whoever our nominee is going to win. And I actually, after seeing J.D. Vance, if you don't believe that, just see J.D. Vance and the angry rant. I believe there are at least 10 Democrats who would beat him in terms of at least. And so if I was a betting person, take me out of it, I'd be betting on the Democratic Party for a comeback and a decisive comeback. And I think I don't agree with this, but there was some Republican pollster I was talking to who said that the vice president started losing the race when she called herself the underdog. And I said, if you're running as an African-American, Indian-American woman, you're the underdog till you win. But he was just saying that it gave this sense of weakness. And while I disagree with the specific example, I do think that their party always projects strength and winning. And, Donald Trump is saying, I'm winning even when he's at 30%. We've got to project winning and confidence. And, Dr. King projected that the day before he died.
Yes.
You're going to, I may not get to there, but you're going to get to the promised land, right? And the country wants that kind of, they want not just fight, they want a sense of confidence.
Because if you are not confident in yourself, why should I be confident in you? Why should I give you the most precious thing that I have as an American citizen, my vote, when you don't even think that we can win, right? Yeah. When you don't even think that you have what it takes. And that is the thing that I think we have to change that mindset in our party, that we're in this to win because we have to win, because it's for the American people. They deserve for us to win because they need somebody who's going to fight for them. Yeah. And so I really hope that we can really change that mindset.
I feel like I'm in church here, Jim.
Oh, no. I just, it's just something that I think often about, because, again, I would not be here but for good people in this Democratic Party.
Same here. Yeah. I mean, the amount of people who opened doors for both of us, right? Yes. I mean, neither of us were self-creations.
No.
There were a lot of people. I mean, if President Obama had not appointed me to that position, I would not have started. And there were a lot of people who helped me and recommended me for that, right? And I think, though, it's good that you're having this conversation with many leaders, because the two things I believe is that whoever is going to lead our party in the Senate and the House more broadly, they're going to, have to get rid of this idea of lanes. They've got to recognize they got to unify the party. Yeah. And B, they've got to balance being a change forward agent with a pride and an exciting the base of the party. And one of the clips actually that went viral of mine, and I'm not one of these people like Jasmine Crockett who gets a viral clip every day or something, and I love what she does, was when I said we're the party that delivered Social Security, and we're the party that delivered Medicare and Medicaid and the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act and the Affordable Care Act and the Earned Income Tax Credit. And it just was like, and I didn't even think much of it, but it went viral because so few people just do that litany. And I'm a student of history. One of the great passages from Mario Cuomo's 1984 speech when he goes, FDR did that, and Truman did that, and Carter did that, right? And now we have other presidents we should be celebrating. There should be a pride.
Because we take for granted that everybody knows it.
That's probably it.
And people really don't.
No,
they really don't. And you have to think about it. There's new young people who are becoming voters every day, and they don't know the history of what we have done. And you have to constantly remind people of those things, the things that you take for granted, the fact that you can take off a work week, the fact that you have family leave, the fact that you have the health insurance for this, that, and that, the fact that you can stay on your parents' insurance. Like, that happened because of Democrats. That happens because we got that done.
Yeah.
And we should take some pride in that, and not to rest on our laurels, but to understand now what's the next step. We've done that. We've checked that box. What are we going to do next? You got a new bill coming up.
Yeah.
Which is near and dear to my mother-in-law Cheryl's life, because she drinks her multiple cups of coffee every morning. So Cheryl, we're talking about, but on coffee tariffs.
I'll tell you whose idea this was. This was our mutual friend, Ron Klain.
Yes.
And Klain
Ron
says, I see you on TV, and you're talking about tariffs, and you sound like the economics lecturer you were at Stanford, and, no one's paying attention. They get lost. I got a simple idea for you. You want to break through? Just make it about repealing the coffee tariff.
Because coffee is expensive as hell. I Starbucks the other day, I was like, geez,
25% more, right?
Yes.
And a lot of folks, they have coffee shops, right? They're going out of business if these tariffs aren't there. We don't grow coffee here. We grow 1% in Puerto Rico and Hawaii, and a lot of that's exported. It's not for the domestic market. We get all our coffee from Brazil, Vietnam, Indonesia. They put a 50% tariff on it, and it's driving the price of coffee up 25%. We fought a revolution in this country over tea, right? Tax on tea, up for a revolution over coffee. It's only, and then you start talking about that, and then you can talk about, the price of hamburgers have gone up.
Yeah.
And the price of apples have gone up, and the price of bananas have gone up. Oh, yeah. Was Vice President Harris right about this tariff being a tax on ordinary Americans? Did she have a decent point there? I mean, not to say I told you so. Just repeal the tariffs, right?
Yeah.
Repeal the tariffs. It's a working class tax, and I think the coffee tax is a broader look at failed economics. This is not how you build the economy. This is not how you put more money in the pockets of folks. And here's the opportunity Democrats have. There are a lot of people, and I'm sure you heard this, who said, well, we know that Trump's not that great for this democracy stuff and women's rights and LGBT rights and voting rights, and he's going to do kind of say bad things, but he's going to make our wallets fatter. He's going to put more money in our pockets, right? That was we know some of those voters. I mean, and guess what? He's not making their wallets fatter.
Not at all.
And I don't think economics is everything. But I do think economics matters for some of those voters who we lost. And when they see that Trump is betraying them on that thing, they're going to turn to Democratic candidates running for the House and Senate.
I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing his approval ratings drop, because people are starting to feel it.
And that's the thing people need to realize. He's 10 points lower than when he won.
Yeah.
But look, criticize me, criticize House members, Senate members for not fighting hard enough, and that's constructive for the most part.
Yeah.
But let's be objective of where he was.
That's exactly
and
right.
where he is, and whether it's the Democrats or whether it's a self-destruction, it's not this kind of hopeless despair situation. By the way, we would have a total decisive win if it weren't for his redistricting shenanigans.
There you
and
go.
He wouldn't be doing the redistricting shenanigans
he knows,
if he was strong.
That's exactly right. He knows he's weak, and he's getting weaker. Well, one of the things that we do every week on this podcast is we give out a very special award. I don't know if your staff told you this. It's called the Sit Your Ass Down Award. Sometimes there are people in politics that just need to take a breather, right?
Yeah.
They need to go to the corner and just think about, as your former kindergarten teacher, think about what you did, right?
Yeah.
Khanna,
Yeah.
who is the recipient of this week's Sit Your Ass Down Award?
I'm going to say this with without anger. And
no anger, no malice.
And I'll say AIPAC, and I'll tell you why. I still meet with AIPAC. I talk to them, but they come up with these platitudes like friends disagree in private. Friends can't criticize each other publicly. I was like, what does that mean? Or, well, we need to talk about the hostage releases and pressuring Hamas to release the hostages when people are saying don't give Netanyahu military weapons. I was like, every single person from Rashida Tlaib on to Hakeem Jeffries to Josh Gottheimer is talking about the release of the hostages. So it's just this kind of 90s speak, and it rings hollow. And I understand there are people who have a deep love and respect and belief in Israel as a Jewish democratic homeland, and they certainly have the right to participate in American politics. But just kind of update the talking points and have some real talk. And if you come at it with real talk, I think you wouldn't be as toxic to the younger generation as you are, because there's a BS meter out there that these young folks have.
I've supported Israel. I've visited Israel. And I just think of what Donald Trump has done for America. I think Netanyahu has done for Israel. And that's not a reflection of the Israeli people, because I know they're great people over there that I've met.
I have too.
And I have good friends who live there. Same here in America. I don't think the American people are reflective of Donald Trump, right?
Yeah.
Because I know the goodness of the folks here. But as leaders, it has been more about them than it has been about the people and the people. When you think about where people want us to be, they want to find common ground. They want to live in peace. They want life to be good, not only for their kids, but for all kids.
And they want a secure Jewish democratic Israeli state, and they want a secure Palestinian state. And the hope for our generation, Jeremy, is not just a hope for America of becoming the first cohesive multiracial democracy in the world, right? We've got such a inheritance, the blessings of so many freedom movements from around the world coalescing in this country. But it's also that an America that really represents traditions and histories from around the world can be a moral and just leader in the world. Maybe I'll end on this one. Barbara Lee and I got to go hear President Carter when he was preaching Sunday school. And he said, America is a superpower. And I was really proud of being the president of the world's greatest superpower. But you know what I think being a superpower really means? I would love the world leaders to be calling the American president saying, can you help us make peace? Can you help us resolve conflict? That's what it means to be a superpower. And I think that's the opportunity our generation has to inspire our nation, inspire the world, and move us forward in the Middle East.
Well, Khanna, it has been a wonderful opportunity to have you sit at our table.
Well, I'm honored, and I've enjoyed it. You made me say things I've not said in the dozens of interviews I've done.
Well, that's what it is all about. That's what it's all about. But this has been fun. I've really enjoyed it, and can't wait to see you back in South Carolina.
I'll be back.
If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. To be the first to know who will be at our table next, find us at ourtablepodcast.com. At Our Table with Jamie Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hayter and Jamie Harrison. Our producers are Kyle Kelly and Emily Harrell. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Celie Riccio. Neil Rossini of FWRV LLP provides production legal. Title sequence by Tom Hunt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. We recorded this episode at the DNC studios in Washington, D.C. Thanks to Curtis Bradley Brown, Johnny Wood, and the DNC studios team. Very special thanks to Congressman Ro Khanna and his team. I'm Jamie Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.